So we just have to move this Aquael Glossy. Some really beautiful fancy goldfish in it. These fish are actually one of the hardest species to keep. And the reason why a lot of people have trouble with them is they're absolutely full of recessive genes, because these fish are basically created by the Chinese. They're not naturally occurring fish, so therefore they tend to be prone to a whole lot of troubles, but they sure do look beautiful when they're not yours. So what did you say his name was?
Banu.
Banu?
Yeah.
Why Banu?
It's the name of like the Egyptian phoenix, whatever.
Wow, this guy's spectacular. What did you say he was again?
Black cap lorry.
Black cap lorikeet?
Yeah, lorry. It's
lorry.
The full name's like Lorius.
And you said he's from Papua New Guinea.
Yeah.
It's just a spectacular bird. Make me think about getting a bird, but my Maine Coon cat probably try to eat it. Have you seen Maine Coons?
No.
They're the world's largest domesticated cat.
Oh.
When you've got a beautiful batch of fancy goldfish like this, and often this is a horrendous amount of money, and it's a really good idea, once you've got these fish stabilized, it's really, you want to consider quarantining any new fish. Because these fish are recessive genes, they tend to be prone to lots of issues because their immune system doesn't tend to be that good. So the things you want to do, make sure your water quality is good and make sure you're feeding good quality food. What are you feeding your food?
Danichi.
Yeah, well, you can't beat Danichi. So quality-wise, Danichi is about the best. So good quality food and good quality water is really the key. So I've just tested up the water. The water's very good. KH could raise a little bit, but I'm not really worried about it. Even the plants, even adding plants, you really want to consider either quarantining the plants or not adding them. So if you quarantine something for a month and it all looks nice and healthy, then great. The other thing that's a good idea, particularly for situations like this where we're moving the tank, is using products like Vogel are really good, because Vogel are a bunch of minerals that help to artificially stimulate immune system. And for fish that tend to be immune suppressed, it's a very good idea. So hitting this tank with a bit of Vogel in the next few days is something I'd highly recommend. There's some absolutely beautiful fish in here. And I love these tanks, these Glossies. I think that they're absolutely beautiful. Now, one of the best things you can get for your aquarium is a magnet cleaner, because a magnet cleaner is a really convenient way of getting your glass nice and clean. But just be aware that if you get your sand caught underneath the magnet cleaner, you can actually scratch the glass. And that's why I would consider getting a flipper. And then a flipper actually has a blade on it and it's raised a bit. So even if you get sand caught under it, it won't scratch the glass. And the blade is far more effective for scraping off the algae. So if this was my tank, the first thing I'd do is go and buy a nice big flipper, because the flipper will make it much easier to keep the tank clean and will avoid the possibility of you scratching the glass. One thing that's a really great idea is these Seachem ammonia alerts. They're absolutely fabulous. You just stick them on the tank and then they change color if there's any ammonia in the water, which if something goes wrong and a fish dies or you overfeed your fish or something goes wrong, this changes color. But just be aware that over time, it does actually expire. So I'd be looking at getting a new one. But putting an ammonia alert on your fish tank can absolutely save your fish tank for a very small price, and I highly recommend getting one and replacing it. When they look like this, you'll definitely need to replace it. Now, if you have a heater in the aquarium and you do have fancy goldfish, one thing that I think is a must is getting some either bristlenose or plecostomus. Make sure you don't get sucking cats, because sucking cats will often suck on the goldfish, and that's not as fun as you'd think. The other thing is, if you are going to keep these animals, keep an eye on their belly. So every time that you see them on the glass, take that opportunity to look at the belly. Make sure they've got a little bit of a belly, because sometimes they don't really get nutritious food. Now, if you're feeding high quality food like Danichi, you sort of can't go wrong. But if you're feeding cheaper food and the catfish are eating the poo from the other fish, most of the nutrients in the food is already absorbed by the other fish and the catfish is just getting crap. So they will eat algae, they will scavenge, but the quality of food is everything. And if you do notice them getting thin, then my recommendation is to feed Spectrum's wafer. And the reason why I specifically want you to feed Spectrum's wafer is that they take about 24 hours before they start to break down. So therefore, I just get the best results out of them. Now, because we're moving these fish, and these are very fancy fish, I would recommend hitting the tank with some Vogel. Now, Vogel is a bunch of minerals that artificially stimulate a fish's immune system. And because these fish are synonymous with low immune systems, I think it would be a very good idea just to grab some Vogel and give them a few doses when they're resettled in after the move, just to make sure their immune system is as strong as it can be. So we know the water quality is good. We know the quality of fish food's good. So they really are magnificent fish. And there's something that you really learn to appreciate once you learn that they're not the easiest fish in the world to keep. They're spectacular when they're somebody else's. So particularly if keeping fish like this, quarantining is really the key, because fish have immune systems, and if you stabilize their immune system and get them used to an environment with high quality food and high quality water, they do really, really well. But then when you go buying a new fish, and that new fish has gone through a fairly stressful process of being caught and sold and everything involved with getting to you, then this stressful situation for the fish compromises their immune system. Now, there is things like Vogel that you can use to reduce that, but at the end of the day, the safest thing you can do is quarantine the fish for a month. That way, when you quarantine them for a month, if anything is likely to go wrong with the fish, then typically it'll show up within that month. Now, the other thing is be careful with plants and any rocks or whatever that's been in the tank. The reason why you need to be careful with them is that when various pathogens breed, they'll have a life cycle, and a part of that life cycle is often what's called a dinoflagellate phase, where the pathogen will become a unicellular organism with a tail, and it'll actually swim around the aquarium. Now, if you have something like an appropriately sized UV sterilizer, that will reduce the chance of your fish getting sick, but nothing will stop them from getting sick. So when these dinoflagellates are propagating, they'll usually reproduce on a hard surface. So that might be the leaf of a plant, that might be gravel, it might be rock. So therefore, if you do have really valuable, vulnerable, beautiful fish like this, then pre-quarantining anything that goes into the tank is very, very wise advice. Because it's absolutely traumatizing when you stabilize a beautiful set of fish like that. I mean, these are really, really beautiful fish. And then to go and buy new fish and bring in new pathogens and then see them get sick. It's very disappointing. Quarantine, plants and fish. So this food, Danichi Goldfish, quality-wise would be about the best food you could buy, in my opinion. But I would consider coupling this with Danichi's Colormax, because I find that Colormax is actually really, really good for helping fish to maintain their color. But you do have to be aware that fish like goldfish are full of recessive genes, so it is very common and very normal for them to change their color. Now, particularly if you've got any sores on the side of any of your fish, such as on the right-hand side of this one, you can see a sore. Well, it's trying to make it difficult to see it, but you can see a sore there. So the first thing you'd want to do is test your water. Bring a water sample down to Majestic Aquariums. Make sure that you're feeding good quality food and your water quality is good. In this case, that is the case. So the other thing you can try is medicating. And we have a very good vet that we work with at Majestic Aquariums. I think she's very reasonable and she's very lovely, and she can come over and diagnose your fish. She uses a microscope to find out exactly what the pathogen is, and then she can use veterinary medications to treat them. And veterinary medications are far, far, far more effective than any of the over-the-counter medications that an aquarium store can sell. So if you have big, beautiful fish, especially ones that are worth good money, it's really worth contacting us at Majestic Aquariums and getting the vet over, because there's nothing more disheartening than having problems with beautifully, spectacularly delicate fish like these.